So today I want to talk for just a few minutes about the basics of MLA and about peer review and what you're going to be doing over the next couple of days with the drafts of your paper. So in the folder for today's activity, you'll notice there's a couple of links that you should take a look at. So the Purdue Online Writing Lab MLA Formatting Guide, and there's also a link to a sample paper they have. And then the video from MIT, No One Writes Alone. It's short. It's a little older, it's a little cheesy, but it still makes a lot of really good points about the activity of peer review, why we do it, and so some points for what you should be thinking about and focusing on as you work on peer review. So, and then there's a chart, which I'm going to talk about for a little bit on feedback response types, and so what kind of feedback you should be focusing on in peer review. So, real quick, basic MLA format. So the Purdue OWL has this. This is also in your textbook. There's a sample first page. So a lot of the stuff for this first paper is just kind of making your paper look good. In other words, follow the formatting guidelines for MLA, which are on the assignment sheet. So that means a couple of things. So the whole paper should be double spaced. It should have 1-inch margins on all sides. It should be in either 12-point Times New Roman or Calibri font. Right, so these are kind of the basic formatting things. If you use Microsoft Word and you leave it on the default settings, it automatically puts extra spaces after paragraphs. So you need to fix that kind of stuff. And a lot of that stuff, and this is kind of something I always say, if you don't know how to do something in Microsoft Word, Google it. That's what I do and what I continue to do. Because there's always people out there who've already kind of figured out the thing that you need to do. So don't be afraid to just kind of say, okay, how do I get rid of spaces after paragraphs in Google? And it'll tell you the answer. I mean, a lot of it's, once you know, it's easy, but if you don't know, it's kind of annoying going through all the toolbars and everything like that. So, so this is for, now the MLA formatting does this for a couple of reasons, right? So as a reader, it's a lot easier to read through something that's double spaced on a screen. And when I grade your papers and comment and everything, it's a lot easier for me to work through them that way. So that's one of the big things. It's also formatting if people want to make notes, right? All that kind of stuff. That allows us to do that. But it's also about consistency, right? Any formatting style, or you may not use MLA after this class. That's fine, right? I don't expect you to. Your own field is going to have a particular style that they adhere to, whether that's MLA, APA, Chicago, Turabian, something else. And so any kind of citational style and formatting style is about knowing the guidelines and being able to follow them. And so for this paper, we don't have to worry about citing outside sources yet. So it makes things a lot easier, but you should have the paper formatted well. You should have it formatted correctly. You should follow those guidelines because it makes it easier to read and all that kind of stuff. So, so double spaced, 1-inch margins, all that, right font, right size, all that kind of stuff. So on the first page of your paper only, if you notice, you can look at either the sample first page in your textbook or the sample paper on the Purdue OWL, right? You notice the first thing. So the first 5 lines of the body of the paper the first 4 are your MLA header, and then the 5th one is your title, right? And the whole thing is just double spaced. You don't add any extra spaces or anything like that in between. You don't make the title size 30 font in wingdings or anything like that. It's just all the same. It's formatted the same as the rest of the paper. So on the left margin, it goes your name, and then it goes my name. You just put Dr. Way or Dr. Jeffrey Way, whatever you want to do. And then the class, so English 102, and then the date. And you'll notice the date is formatted a little bit differently. So it goes day, month, year. So, today, as I'm recording the video, it is the 27th of June. So it would be 27 June 2016, right? So it's a little bit different. You spell it out. So those are the first 4 lines. Those are on the left margin. That's only on the first page. It shouldn't be in the header, so we shouldn't see it on every page of your paper. It should just be on that first page. The 5th line is your title, right? And so that should be centered on the 5th line in the middle, right? So it should kind of right above the text. And then the title needs to be unique. So MLA, every citational style asks that you have a unique title, something that tells us what your paper is about. Because think about it. When you look at a title of an article or a movie, right, that's supposed to tell you something about what you're about to get into, what you're about to read or watch. A really bad title is not going to catch our attention. It's not going to hook us in or anything like that. So your title should not be Paper 1, Rhetorical Analysis, Facebook Profile Analysis, or any riff on something like that, because It's zero effort, right? It doesn't have to be the most clever, snappy title in the world. That's fine. You don't have to be, you know, Shakespeare when writing your title. It just needs to be descriptive, right? So here's a little bit of low-hanging fruit, right? But when people do Bernie Sanders, any riff off "Feeling the Burn," I've seen that a lot lately this past year. You know, something like that works as a title, something like that. So, so that's the first 5 lines of your papers. Is your MLA header the first 4 lines, and then your title's on the 5th line. It's centered, and then from there, you start your paper. No breaks. You shouldn't have words wrap across the end of lines, anything like that, right? You know, all that kind of stuff. And then the only other thing that you'll need right now really is page numbers, and that's the only thing that goes in the header of your paper. So if you don't know how to do that, to get into the header on Microsoft Word, as long as you have the whole page available on the screen, you just double click at the very top and it'll put you in the header. And on the right margin, you should have your last name and the page number. And that's it. So on each page, we should see, you know, if it was my paper, you would see way 1, way 2, way 3, way 4, and on down. So everything else for this paper is pretty much, you don't need to worry about the MLA citation stuff. The only other thing is you are welcome to include images, and people have asked about that. So yeah, you're welcome to include images. Now with MLA, when you put an image in your paper, you do need to have a descriptive caption. So you can't just drop an image in. So right under an image that you incorporate into your paper, you need to have a caption that tells us a little bit about what it is. You know, Hillary Clinton's post from June 10th or whatever, right? So about gun control. And it doesn't have to be super detailed and complex, but just enough to give your reader a sense of why you've included this image in your paper. So the other option is you can do an appendix at the end of the paper and then kind of just include images there too. But that means your reader's kind of going back and forth. So it's kind of up to you. So again, the Purdue OWL has how to do that. Your book, I think, talks about how to do that as well. So you can always ask me if you have questions. But that's about kind of the basic rundown for MLA. So I want to switch for just a couple of minutes and talk about peer review. So the peer review activities you're going to be doing, as I mentioned in some earlier videos, for each paper, you're going to do a content-based peer review. That's a series of questions about kind of what the author is saying in the paper, the content, right? The structure of their analysis, the points of their argument, whatever. And then the second peer review will be an editing and proofreading peer review. So, you know, when you watch the MIT video, it gives you a lot of good pointers about how to do peer review and what your goal is, like what you bring. And as they say in that video, you bring the perspective of a reader, and that's one of the best things you can bring in a peer review. And so if you look at that little feedback chart that I've included in today's set of materials, you notice there's 8 different types of feedback that this chart talks about, and they give you the type of response, a definition, and a brief example. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, they say in the video, right, one of the professors in the video says that he doesn't allow students to say, I liked it more than once per class, and I'm going to say the same thing, right? So global praise, when you say great paper, that doesn't help anybody make their draft stronger. Because guess what? It's probably not a great paper yet, which is fine. That's the whole point of the writing process of drafting papers. But when you just say good job, that doesn't help anybody make their paper stronger. So one of the things I look for and I grade you on in your peer review responses is detailed feedback, is that you answer those questions fully and you really think about what is it they're doing in the paper, what can they improve on. You know, if something's good, you can say that, but you want to talk about why it's good, you know, why this is a really good paragraph or this is a really great point that they make. Because even pointing that out and pointing out specifics allows them to say, oh, okay, so this paragraph worked really well, so maybe I need to follow that model for another paragraph later in the paper. So global praise, you know, or, you know, on the flip side, global criticism, this paper sucks, which you shouldn't say that anyway, isn't helpful, right? Because you are not doing anything for the author. You're not helping them make their paper stronger. So right under that second type of feedback, personal response, okay, first off, keep in mind that peer review is a very, you know, kind of nerve-wracking activity sometimes, especially in this class when you might not have met your classmates face-to-face. You're sharing your paper with people you don't know, and that requires a great deal of trust, right? So as a peer reviewer, it's your responsibility to reward that trust and help them, make their paper stronger. So something like personal response is you don't want to focus on in peer review. So you're not about the psychological involvement of the writer or about, who they are as a person and what they feel about their paper. So if you don't agree with, if they like Trump and you don't agree with it, or they like Clinton and you don't agree with it, or they're all about Facebook and you hate it, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? It's not your responsibility to tell them why you think they're wrong and they're an idiot, things like that. So this is where those course guidelines come in, and, the rule of don't be a jerk. But again, that stuff doesn't really help anybody make a paper stronger, because sometimes sometimes we write something and that is not representative of who we are as a person, right? It might just be an assignment you're doing for class, right? Or if it's a story, again, that might be something you came up with. It's not about who you are as a person. So that kind of response isn't really helpful. Now, text playback can be helpful. That's what I was talking about with the picking out specific examples and saying, hey, this works really well and I like this. I think this is a good point you make. Or this particular point kind of maybe needs a little bit more work, because pointing to specific examples can help us make a paper better, right? It can help make our writing stronger. Instead of just saying, oh, this needs some work, saying, hey, your second paragraph, there's a lot of description and needs more analysis. That's concrete feedback that can be helpful. So the next two, which I'll just talk about together, sentence edits and word edits, you're not going to focus on them as much in your first review on content. You're going to focus more on what the argument is, or the analysis is for this paper. But in the second one, in the editing proofreading peer review, you definitely will focus on sentence edits and word edits, because that's going to be a large part of the activity. Now, if you notice something recurring a whole lot in the first draft on the content peer review, you can make a note of that, right? If they use the same phrase 20 times, you might want to say, hey, I just noticed you use this phrase a lot. Maybe you should rework that. Or this whole paragraph doesn't seem to make sense, or it seems like a lot of run-on sentences, right? That's, if it's affecting the content, right, and how you're reading the paper, that's something to note. But especially for the content peer review, you aren't going to get a lot into the grammatical stuff just yet, things like that. Really, where you're going to focus on are those last two things, the reader's needs and the writer's strategies. And that is, as the video from MIT says, right, that's what you bring. You bring the perspective of a reader, and that's one of the best things you can offer as a peer reviewer. So as somebody who's coming in and reading this paper, what makes sense for you? What seems to work really well? What's interesting? What's engaging? What seems strong? And what needs more work, right? Where do they need to build up a point? Where do they need to revise a paragraph? Things like that. These are the things you're focusing on. So, it kind of goes hand in hand with writer strategies, right? Because as a reader, you're also a writer for this class, especially, right? So what strategies do you see them using? Maybe is there a strategy you use that might be more helpful, right? So this could be talking about organization. You're talking about the particular examples they've chosen to talk about, topic sentence. It could be a lot of different things you focus on. But that's where you really want to focus what feedback you give. You want to help them make the paper stronger. That is your goal as a peer reviewer. You want to be respectful, right? You want to, you don't need to be, super critical, right? Your goal is to say, hey, we're all in this together. This is a work in progress. Here's how to make that stronger. So, now on the peer review activities themselves, when you look at the content peer review, you will notice they are sets of questions about different concepts, right? So you'll see a set of questions about the introduction, the thesis, organization, analysis, that kind of stuff, to answer those questions. Now, not every question is going to apply, right? There are a series of questions, so you won't answer every single question, but a lot of them will. A lot of them will be things you need to talk about. And on top of that, you'll notice that either the questions are not, most of them are not yes or no questions, or if it is a yes or no question, it's immediately followed up by one that isn't, which means your peer review feedback should be detailed. For each answer, I'm looking for 3 to 5 solid sentences that is going to be helpful for the author, that it's going to help them make their paper stronger, right? Whether, and again, that doesn't have to be, you don't have to find something wrong for every single question, right? But be able to say, oh, you seem to be doing a really good job on organizing your paper, and I liked how you put this point and this point and this point together, and you have good transitions, right? That kind of stuff is helpful. Saying, oh, paper's organized well, or organization needs work that doesn't help people out. And so if that's your feedback, you're not going to get a good grade on those peer reviews. So pay attention to those questions, make sure you're answering them fully. Now, when we come on peer reviews, like sometimes we'll have a peer review where there might be some optional questions. So if there's a section that the author might have but isn't required to have yet, obviously you don't have to answer all those questions. So in terms of the editing and proofreading peer reviews, when you get to that, you'll notice that there's two parts to that. There's a couple of content questions that you can answer, and then there's an activity that asks you to use the track changes and comments features. And there's a YouTube video with the first editing, proofreading peer review that you can watch that kind of shows you how to use those features. You're going to really work on kind of helping them polish up the paper, making sure, if there's content stuff pointed out, but a lot of it's hopefully, kind of they've worked it out at that point, and you want to make sure it's looking good, right? It's something they're going to be ready to submit by next Wednesday. So if you have questions about the peer review activities and what you're doing, always let me know. I'll be posting announcements a little bit closer with a little bit more of the details, and I will put you in peer review groups each day, so you will know you'll have groups of papers that you'll be looking at. So you'll be posting to that thread and then replying to both of the authors in your group, or each of the authors in your group. A few of you might have uneven numbers, things like that. So, but that will be the activity for that day, and you'll need to make sure you're providing good feedback. So if you have any questions, let me know, post in the discussion board for questions, things like that. Otherwise, good luck, and provide good feedback.